9 o'clock p.m. in Italy and different time all over the world. We choose this time because it is probably acceptable for most of the people all around, east, west, wherever you're connecting to this webinar. I hope it is convenient as timing and day. This is the Transosseous Academy. What is the Transosseous Academy for those who are novel to this experience? It is a group of study and research that I founded along with Matteo Mantovani, a brilliant engineer, a few years ago, in order to study and develop systems to repair the rotator cuff with better results, user-friendly, and easy to manage tool that can be even a little cheaper than the actual one. This is one of the reasons probably you don't see many advertising from major companies, but it is probably a new perspective. And this is why we are here. We were supposed to have our meeting in Latin America, in Lima, in one of these days. But of course, the crisis of COVID stopped us. We wanted to be very close to our friends in Latin America, but we will do something for our friends, and you will see very shortly. How did we plan this special event? In 3 different phases, 3 different days, because staying too long in front of the computer can be a little difficult or even boring. So we have day 1, that is tonight, where we make an introduction from a scientific standpoint, both for biology, indication, and the biomechanics from the engineer, and why you or me, I should use it. Then we stop. You can go to our website and observe the technique and the videos that we publish on this website and look at them. And then in 1 week or so, on July the 3rd, we will have another experience altogether, this time very much interactive. We will have a big teacher for this kind of surgery, arthroscopic shoulder surgery. My mentor and very good friend, Steve Snyder, will give a special lecture about the rotator cuff repair, the history. So this is a great honor for us to have him giving this talk. And then we will have a round table with a lot of discussion, open discussion. Of course, we have a panelist, myself and Claudio Chillemi, Jean Cani from France, Wiseman and Brett Sanders. And we will have a lot of discussion with question and answer. So open discussion after this introduction tonight and after watching the videos. Then the special event that is dedicated to the LATAM, the Latin American experience. This will be on July the 11th, 2020. It will be in Spanish. Of course, I will not be able to speak a great Spanish, so you will forgive me and Claudio if you will speak English. But anyways, this will be in Spanish with a great faculty for the round table with a lot of good friends since ever. Miriam Capasso, Victor Naula, Byron Torres, Cesar Mancini, Casanova Gonzalez, Mendoza Rojas, and Vega Schumacher. So this is the plan to have a reasonable timing to do all this program in the most fruitable way for everyone who wants to be connected. So we start now with some science. This is the introduction, but some science is the support of whatever we do in our professional life. And I invite Dr. Claudio Chillemi to give his lecture. Claudio is a friend since ever. We did a lot of study, research, but most of all, what is the cement between us is the passion and the love for our job. He's a great expert about biology, and he gave a great contribution in the activity of the Transosseous Academy, in the development of the tool, and so on and so on. And he prepared a wonderful book about transosseous rotator cuff repair. You can find it both online or even buy it. It is by Springer. So he's a friend, but also a big scientist. So Claudio, you will talk about biology and indication for the transosseous. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Alex, for the invitation. Thank you, Matt. Hi, Luis Macedo. And so thank you for the presentation. And now we will start with the work. And my first topic is the biology of the rotator cuff. And we will talk about the biology from the tear to the repair. I would like to change my slides, but I have some problems. Chiara, can you help me, please?
Try to go also full screen, Claudio.
No? You see the slide?
We can see the first slide.
Okay.
It is moving now, but please go to the full screen. So select bottom right, full screen, like a standard PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. You see now?
We see it, but it is not advancing. And Victor Naula, who is very much expert with this, is suggesting to close and open again the presentation. It is typical with technology. Just switch off and start over again.
Chiara, you can do for me?
Now you should be on full screen.
I am full screen now?
No.
You see me?
Miriam Capasso dice basta che cada alla parte inferiore dello schermo e passa le immagini dalla freccia inferiore.
Però Alex, come le vedi le diapositive tu?
Le vedo sufficientemente bene, non è a tutto schermo, ma va bene, è perfettamente visibile.
Ok, Chiara però ha chiuso adesso, vediamo un po'.
Vuoi provare tu a aprirlo dal tuo PC, Claudio? Se...
No, Chiara, mandamelo, proviamolo un attimo. Io per questo avevo chiesto prima questa cosa.
Perfect. Now it's perfect. Full screen, perfect.
Okay. It's okay now?
Reasonable. Let's start from the beginning. There we are.
Okay. So before starting and speaking about the repair, the healing process, I would remember all of you how a tendon is made. Is made quite almost completely by collagen, and cells that are fibroblasts are limited. The type of collagen is especially type 1 collagen, and is responsible for the structural and mechanical properties of the tendon. In the tendon, we can find other types of collagen that collaborate to the structure. When we have to face a tendinopathy, we know that tendinopathy accounts for about 15% of both work-related and sports-related injuries. The problem is that tendinopathy is often asymptomatic, and one day we we know the problem is that the tendon is ruptured. In fact, rotator cuff tendinopathy is the most common tendon disorder. There is a problem with the screen, I think, of the shoulder, which causes pain and dysfunction. Different proteins and molecules play a role for tendinopathy. One of that are cytokine, in particular interleukin-1, that plays an important role during the inflammation process. And interleukin-1 increase in tendon exposed to mechanical loads and may contribute to the inflammation in tendinopathy. For this reason, the inhibition of interleukin-1 was proposed to use in the treatment of tendinopathy, and because the inhibition of interleukin-1 may reverse pathologic changes associated with established tendinopathy, and this was a study that demonstrated that the tendinopathy may be reversible almost in an animal model. Another proteins that can make a role during tendinopathy are the metalloproteinases. The metalloproteinases are a large family of enzymes that are able to degrade all tendon matrix components, and they may play a major role during physiological events in tendon homeostasis. The metalloproteinases may be inhibited in a reversible way by a family of inhibitors that are essentials in the maintenance of tendon extracellular matrix homeostasis. Alex was a pioneer in the study of metalloproteinases and demonstrated the role of the metalloproteinases during rotator cuff tendon tear. Moreover, tendinopathy, we know that is a condition that is age-related. In fact, tenocytes may change their phenotypic aspects and may develop from tenocytes, may occur chondroplasia in fibrochondrocytes and mineralized fibrochondrocytes. And this age-related tendinopathy is also the expression of different tendon-associated genes. Another condition for tendinopathy is the hypoxia, because in the area of decreased tendon vascularity, the tendon may degenerate. Another theory for the tendinopathy, to develop tendinopathy, is the mechanical theory, because different mechanical force may induce a change in the tenocytes. For this reason, when a tendon is degenerated, may occur a tear. And during a study that we made some years ago, we detected a fibrous cartilage in the torn rotator cuff in the stump of the tendon, the ruptured tendon, and probably this fibrous cartilage metaplasia may be the pathogenetic mechanism for the tear. For this reason, we recommend to resect the edge of the rotator cuff tendon as much as possible to remove the cartilaginous tissues and facilitate the repair process. The tendon, the rotator cuff tendon, when it is degenerated, obviously the extracellular matrix is disorganized, and there is a change in the collagen structure, and in particular, we can detect a significant decrease in collagen type 1, while we can observe an increase in mucoid, protoglycan, water content, and calcium concentration. All we know that the tendon healing process is strictly related to biological factors and mechanical factors. when we have to repair a tendon, for example, an Achilles tendon, the repairs may occur from tendon to tendon. And the main goal of the surgeon is to approximate and maintain the contact between the two tendon stumps. So to activate the cascade of the fibrillogenesis of tendon healing, that is a cascade of 3 different overlapping phases. The first one is the inflammation, the second is the proliferative, and the third is the modeling phase that may last till 6 weeks, in which the tendon is reshaped from the original. The first phase of the fibrillogenesis during the tendon healing process starts with the inflammation, because when we have a tissue injuries, there is the degradation of products of the extracellular matrix, and so we can observe an influx of cells, in particular neutrophils, monocytes, and macrophages that may accumulate, and there is a lot of vasoactive mediators, chemoattractive factors, and growth factors and enzymes that may degrade the matrix and activate the process. Activate the process is activate the cellular process is the proliferative one phase, in which we can observe a high synthesis of collagen type 3 at first. The water content is really high, and there is also a high concentration of glycosaminoglycans. The healed tendon in this phase remains hypercellular, and the diameter of collagen fibers is thinner. After that, we have the modeling phase, in which we can observe a decrease of cellularity and a lower collagen and GAG synthesis, because the healing tissues is resized and reshaped. As you can observe in this slide, we can see quite easily the normal tendon crimp, that is the waving aspect of the tendon, of the normal tendon during the relaxation process. This process is a bit different when we have to talk about the rotator cuff tendon, because as you can see, and as you know, the rotator cuff tendon repair process is a tendon to bone junction. So the aim of the surgeon is to reattach the tendon to bone at its junction, so to recreate the enthesis at the site of the repair. In fact, you know that the tendon is attached to the bone in a particular region that is called enthesis, in which we can observe the tendon, the cartilage, in specifically uncalcified cartilage. Then we can have the calcified cartilage till the bone. This process, when we have to talk about tendon process, this process starts anteriorly and posteriorly, then in mid portion. So in a paper published on a primate model, was observed that the repair tissue occur in particular anteriorly and posteriorly, then in mid portion, and occur particularly at the firmly held points of the repair, so where the sutures are located. Another important aspect for the tendon to bone healing is the bursal contribution, because we know that bursal tissue is richly vascularized, and bursa represents a great source of cells during the proliferative phase of the tendon healing process. This contribution was also underlined by Alex and me in a paper some years ago. And another aspect that may play an important role during the tendon to bone healing is the bone marrow from the greater tuberosity. So we recommend to prepare in a good way the greater tuberosity, so the bed where the tendon have to pose. And the bone marrow from the greater tuberosity may represent the most prominent source of cells and vessels. All we know, Steve Snyder, and all we know the crimson duvet phenomenon that he described some years ago, in which with the microperforation of the greater tuberosity, we can obtain a reddish purple colored cloth resembling a blanket on the greater tuberosity that cover also the tendon. With the transosseous suture technique, we can provide a great blood supply through the bone tunnels, and this blood supply may contribute to biologic healing, increasing blood flow in the repaired calf. So I tried to underline the biological factors that occur during the tendon healing process, but we know that biological factors are strictly correlated with mechanical one to obtain a good tendon healing. So Matt, let's play you with the mechanical factors. Thank all.
Okay, thank you, Claudio, for this very good presentation about all the biology that is, of course, the basement of any repair that we do. And we need to understand this very clearly in order to choose the proper patient, the proper timing, and so on, because we know that rotator cuff tears are a nightmare in terms of recurrence that, as we define together, it is not a re-tear, it is a non-healing. But now let's see how biomechanically we can really support a good healing of the tendon. And I asked Matteo Mantovani, who is an engineer, I told you already, brilliant and very creative, who did all the studies about the biomechanics of the rotator cuff repair, especially focused on transosseous techniques. Matteo, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
So, okay. So let's jump into this discussion about biomechanics. Unfortunately,
scusami Matteo, perché non selezioni il testo pieno? Perché me lo chiede il mitico Zanotti. Se lo metti per favore a schermo pieno lo vediamo tutti meglio.
Cioè, in realtà è già a schermo pieno, adesso provo a vedere la condivisione. Stop share.
Se no va bene anche così, si riesce a capire molto bene.
Ok, now it should be okay. Okay.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay, let's jump into this biomechanical discussion on Saturday evening, which is pretty unusual. So I cannot skip the slide. Okay, so as it was introduced by Claudio, the influencing factor that actually give a contribute to the healing process could be split into two main categories, mechanical and biological. But this talk is about the mechanical factor. Actually, can we say that this split is so clear and definite? The answer is no, above all if we look into the many way biology has tried to be improved with several types of technology over time. So, what does the literature report about mechanical aspects into the efficacy of coming to a successful repair? So is there a common metric to evaluate performance? And the answer actually, unfortunately, is not. So the first part of my talk is about the whole discrepancy that you can find in literature and try to provide an explanation why we find so many discrepant data in the various papers talking about biomechanics. So I tried to list the all factor affecting and influencing the healing process, and I did a second split in between mechanical factors, which can be listed as UTS, so ultimate tensile strength, gap formation, and tension on suture, and geometrical factor, which actually include area, contact area, and contact pressure and suture configuration. So what are the most studied parameters in biomechanics? So the pillar that support all the biomechanical study about rotator cuff repair, load to failure is the most reported one and has to do with static environment, while gap formation, which is less reported, but in my opinion is the most important one, has to do with a dynamical way of testing the repair. So a fatigue test, which is actually the environment we find into the shoulder. So there's a lot of literature, and in between literature, I mean, it's clearly evidenced if we talk about ankles that double row or transosseous equivalent technique are superior from a biomechanical standpoint to single row repair. So why don't we see a clear translation of these biomechanical results into a clinical results? This is the first question I asked myself a long time ago, because actually there's not so much clear evidence between the difference. This is just an indication. This is a literature review about different studies collected over time, reporting various data, reporting load to failure, reporting gap formation, reporting stiffness, reporting UTS data and cycles to failure. And if you go into the details, you will realize that there's not explainable difference between this study. And this is mainly due to the fact that there's a lack of consistency in the way people are reporting and are testing, above all in biomechanical setup. So in my opinion, there's a big need, there should be a push in finding out a common way to clearly state and specify which are the user parameters which can significantly influence the measured results. I decided some years ago to start studying with a different approach after I tried to do myself my own experiment in the lab. Due to the many differences and difficulties that you may face testing organic materials in a lab, I tried to explore the finite element analysis road. And before doing my own model and before publishing my own model, I went into literature in order to assess and evaluate what was the status of the art. And it was at least clear that there was a good agreement between the various papers, and there was a good agreement, at least from a qualitative standpoint, to what was observed into a real clinic. So, for example, in this, the first study was the first example reporting on 2D analysis. Then we jump into 3D system. And in this 3D system, we have been able to replicate the nucleation area of a tear as it is recorded normally, as it is observed normally in the clinical setting. And that was a good indication that this kind of model could play a role and could have more significant impact in the next future. Most interestingly, there are a series of papers coming from Japan, actually, which try to evaluate what we evaluate also in our own model about peak of stress into the repair due to made with the various techniques. And this is something that is neglected and not considered at all in any biomechanical study, but this is of great importance in order to understand the result, in order to evaluate the result reported by this experimental setup. So in this paper, it has been demonstrated that the transosseous repair shows by far the most homogeneous pressure distribution both at the interface between tendon and bone and at the interface between suture and tendon, which is the second weak point we need to consider. In this paper, instead, they tried to mimic the effect of a partial tear, and this was very congruent with the experimental result and with the type of failure that we observed every day in the OR. So in this paper, I mean, this exactly confirmed the same type of results that I reported before. And so in this different approach, they have been able to confirm that the transosseous repair is by far the one that stress less the interface, as I told you before, both between tendon and bone and between tendon and suture. So what can we measure with this virtual model? We can measure area of contact, we can measure UTS, we can measure pressure distribution, we can measure above all peak stress, which is a very important factor if we want to evaluate how much the repair does affect the interaction between tendon and suture. We can evaluate the type of suture configuration, we can evaluate the geometry effect, so lesion size, position of the lesion and shape of the lesion, and you can also try to assess the displacement at the end. So other experimental biomechanical study reporting the contact area, which is one of the most studied over the years parameters, and there's a great discrepancy in the numbers reported in literature. And this, I tried to do it myself several times, and I can report you that this is a very complicated parameter to be evaluated. But if we start with the hypothesis that the larger the contact area, the larger the probability to come to a successful repair at the end, we truly understand that this is an important parameter, but at the same time, we realize that this is very difficult to measure experimentally. So other literature reporting, I mean, there's a sort of continuity from a qualitative standpoint, but not from a quantitative standpoint. So actually several studies are in agreement that double row and above all transosseous equivalent and above all transosseous have a larger contact area compared to single row, for example, but there's a great discrepancy about the real value. This was one of the most cited paper reporting one of the most successful attempts of measuring from an experimental standpoint the contact area, contact between tendon and bone. And this paper is in good agreement with what we published. So this is another very quoted paper, more or less reporting the same. In this paper, they took also under consideration the effect of the dynamic environment, tried to measure how much the contact area can be influenced by the intra-extra rotation during the test. So more or less, this confirms what reported in the previous paper. So this is the paper we published some years ago, and this is a 3D model which allows us to also compare different suture configuration, and above all, one parameter that was never reported by any authors before, and was about the suture tension. So in this model, we can apply a preload, a pre-tensioned suture, and we can evaluate over time how this tension can change and how this tension can be influenced by the repair configuration. In this experiment, what we have been able to demonstrate is that transosseous equivalent and transosseous repair are by far the approaches that provide the larger contact area. There's another important parameter reported by Mazzocca and co-authors here that no one ever considered before, and so the effect of time. It is not enough to measure and evaluate the static performance at time zero. It is by far important to evaluate how much this performance is kept and maintained over time. And they demonstrate actually that this contact pressure decrease over time. And this is pretty normal. This is the viscoelastic effect of materials we are dealing with. And so this is another important parameter we need to consider. And this is why it is so much important to test our repair in a dynamic environment and not to limit our test setup to a static environment. If we do measure only the UTS, we are missing the most important information in our experiment. So, how much important is to recreate the anatomical footprint? There are many papers reporting the importance of this, actually more from a qualitative standpoint than from a quantitative standpoint, but actually the only papers reporting the direct connection between biology, so between how much important is to enlarge this contact area and the probability to increase the success rate of your repair are Scott Rudio and I cannot see the other, a reporter from Scott Rudio, from Oguna, and from Saint Pierre. I think that this is the pronunciation. This has been the only author so far reporting explaining why it is important to have a larger contact area, to have a larger probability, a higher probability of improving the success rate. So, but also, once we study the literature and we try to find a correlation between biomechanical studies and clinical outcome, also we find papers such as these, which actually report the need to improve the quality of the way outcomes are measured in clinical outcome. And this to explain that, I mean, the spread of data that we have evaluated in biomechanical publication are also present in clinical publication. So there's a need to be more consistent, both sides, in order to be able to demonstrate a clear correlation between mechanical aspects and clinical outcome. But let's jump into the main reason of this presentation. So let's be focused on Transosseous repair, and let's be focused on which are the key factors that we need to consider in order to evaluate and assess how good is our Transosseous repair. So I tried to list the key factor, and we published about this in the book from Claudio. The key factors that we need to consider in order to evaluate how good is our Transosseous repair are depth of the lateral tunnel, and then I will spend some more explanation about each point, tunnel shape, avoid direct impingement between suture and bone, and avoid sharp corners in general, distribute pressure at the interface, avoid peaks, avoid sparks of pressure, and start thinking in terms of load sharing construct. Let's jump into each factor and let's give you some more explanation about the different aspects I reported here. So there are several papers that study which is the best area to start creating the transosseous tunnel on the lateral aspects of the tuberosity in order to avoid problem related, for example, to osteopenic bone, in order to avoid problems such as tunnel collapse. And it has been clearly demonstrated that there's an optimal working range which has been defined between 15 and 25 millimeters from the top of the footprint. And in this area, actually, there's a more consistent bone quality. And of course, we are in a very safe area, far away from the axillary nerve. So this is a safe area, but at the same time, I mean, we can have a more consistent bone quality, and we can have a higher probability to, or a reduced probability to have a problem related to the osteopenic bone. Second point I mentioned in my list before, shape of the tunnel. This was another studied, important studied factor. So why it is important to avoid sharp corner into the bone, and why it is important to avoid having direct contact between suture and bone, because of the cut-through phenomenon, and because this is the main source of gap formation in a dynamic environment. Once again, if you test this configuration from a static standpoint, you don't perceive the difference, but if you start fatigue testing the repair, you will assess immediately how much important it is to have a smooth tendon, a smooth tunnel because actually we do reduce the pressure at the interface between suture and bone. And we have also to keep in mind that our sutures are like springs. So the longer the suture, the larger the gap during the loading phase in a dynamic environment. So keep in mind that the main source of elasticity, the main source of gap formation comes from the suture itself. But if we don't avoid direct contact between suture and bone, we may enlarge this initial gap over time and up to a point where we completely lose the intimate contact between tendon and bone. This is a publication we released some years ago, and this publication studied the performance of a transosseous repair as a function of bone quality. And we have seen, I mean, the reason of this publication was to evaluate when and if there's a need of an augmentation on the side, and when and if I can use the pure transosseous non-augmented approach in a safe manner. And we demonstrate that below a certain threshold, there's a need of an augmentation on the side if I want to keep consistent the performance in a dynamic environment. But once again, we studied extensively the effect of a sharp corner into the bone. And as you see in the central image with 15 PCF, you do clearly see the cut-through phenomenon measured in a synthetic environment. And this has to do with the high pressure interface between the tendon, between the suture and the bone. Another important factor we need to consider, distribute pressure at the interface. So the main difference we have seen in literature, and we have assessed both from an experimental standpoint in the lab and from an experimental standpoint in our finite element model, is that by shifting from single row to double row, and by moving to double row to transosseous equivalent, and finally to transosseous, pure transosseous, we have a significant decrease in the contact pressure between suture and tendon, and between tendon and bone. Why this is so important to consider? Because actually we are not looking for a maximization of the pressure at the interface. We are looking to optimize with an even level of pressure the contact between tendon and bone. So that's why it is not helpful to have a very high pressure at the interface. What we are looking for the optimal pressure. So once again, the type of repair approach affects significantly this factor, and we have been able to demonstrate that transosseous is the one that provides the optimal pressure at the interface. Load sharing construct. This is how we play with suture. There could be multiple ways of playing with suture, but my recommendation in order to optimize the performance is to cross-link the suture, is to create a load share effect and not have single suture bearing the load alone. This is very risky because at that point we do increase significantly the interface between suture and tendon and the interface between tendon and bone. And this is not what we are trying to optimize in our repair. The more we cross-link the suture, the better it is for our repair, above all in a dynamic environment. So this has to do a lot with the AO principle that has been published many years ago about synthesis in a fracture repair. This paper, and I'm getting close to the end of my talk, this paper actually explains exactly what I just mentioned. So how much important is the suture configuration in order to optimize the pressure at the interface. Another important point we need to consider, unfortunately, we have revision, and we need to consider also which is the optimal repair approach from a biomechanical standpoint, even in revision's case. And in this publication, the authors have shown that actually transosseous is the only approach that can provide the same contact area that was present at the beginning, and that can provide the same level of performance as a primary repair approach. That's all.
Thank you very much. There were a few questions from Brett Sanders, and probably you answered to some of those. One was, what about the maximum load, the evidence about the optimal maximum load that is acceptable, the strength of the repair, if you have this data?
Well, actually, there's a lot of confusion about this kind of information, and there's, I mean, the variability in literature is over 200.
Let's take the other way. Let's take the other way. What is the minimum strength of the repair, biologically speaking, before having a failure? This was the question from Brett.
Well, actually, the question has not a simple answer, because the answer shall correlate the UTS and the displacement as well. These two factors are very important, because, I mean, from literature, what literature doesn't consider very much is it is not helpful to have a 500 Newton repair resistance with a 10 millimeter displacement, because at 10 millimeters, the repair is destroyed. So which is the minimum displacement that we can accept? This, to me, is the way of putting the question, and I would say the maximum acceptable gap should be under 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeter maximum. And so, in my experience, the load for this displacement could be at around 300 and 450, depending on the kind of configuration you put in place. But also, this may be strongly.
You mean Newtons?
Newtons. Sorry, I didn't mention the units. Yes, yeah. Newtons.
Just to be clear, but you touched properly the point. I mean, it is a mixture of strength and displacement.
Yes.
Avoiding the peaks. I think it was quite clear, but it was good to go back into this topic. So thank you, Brett, for the question. Now we move on. Thank you. It was a great presentation, Matteo, because very few people, they are so deeply into this biomechanical issue that is as much as important as the biological one that was outlined by Claudio. But now, Claudio, I have a question for you. Now we know the biology, we know the biomechanics. Which are the optimal indication for this kind of surgery? You are muted. You're muted. Open your mic. Open your mic.
Yes, Alex, it's a good question, but it's the topic of my next presentation. So if you want, if you have...
This is why I asked you.
Okay, so for me, but I show you with slides, some slides. With Transosseous, you can repair each type of lesion.
No, but my question was rhetorics. I just wanted to introduce the next presentation.
Ah, okay. So, Chiara, help me. Please, Chiara.
Yes, okay, just a second.
Okay. I'll show you my indication. And Alex.
Yes, tell me.
Okay. You can see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So let's start. Okay. This topic is now about the surgical indication, my indication. But Chiara, please. You see the slides in full screen?
No?
Chiara, can you help me? I lost my presentation. Matt?
Now we can see it. Perfect.
But I don't see it very well.
Because you have old goggles. You need to change your glasses.
I can move it. Chiara? Chiara?
Yes.
Chiara, io le vedo malissimo le mie diapositive. Meglio come prima, perché prima le vedevo almeno.
No, però sei perfetto, noi ti vediamo.
Però io non ce l'ho davanti, Matt.
Allora, prova a lanciarla dal tuo computer, Claudio.
Prova a rimandarle come prima. Prova a rimandarle come prima, Chiara, vediamo un po'. E poi non le cambio. Sorry. Chiara? Chiara?
Yes, Claudio.
Puoi rimpicciolirle un po'?
Noi vediamo bene. Vuoi provare tu a lanciarlo dal tuo PC? Io adesso ti ho dato il controllo, ma noi vediamo bene.
Guarda, le provo a lanciare dal mio.
Vediamo perfettamente.
Dimmi se vuoi provare a lanciarlo dal tuo.
Provo a lanciarlo dal mio, sì.
Allora faccio lo stop share.
Chiara?
Sì, Claudio?
Ti ho perso.
Riesci a lanciarla dal tuo PC?
Ci sto provando, ma non mi pare.
Ma tu devi fare soltanto, scusami Claudio, devi fare soltanto, apri la tua presentazione normalmente, dopodiché vedi quella cosa sotto, share screen,
Sì,
clicchi
Alex,
su
però ho
quella.
perso tutto adesso.
Selezioni la tua finestra e vai. Ecco, adesso ci siamo.
Ci siamo?
Sì, vai a tutto schermo, in basso a destra, e inizia la tua presentazione. Perfetto.
Okay. Io non mi vedo, però l'importante è che vedete le diapositive. Ok.
Perfettamente, perfettamente.
So, when we can use the Transosseous with arthroscopy for rotator cuff repair, which is the right indication? We tried with Alex to make a flow chart when to use the arthroscopy transosseous approach for repair a tendon tear. There is a lot of techniques. I say that it's a tool and you can play with it because we are able to repair partial tear in different way with double tunnel. We can repair small, medium, large tear, and we can also manage tendon re-tear or non-healing. And in this case, we can use a lateral cortical humeral augmentation. In fact, we can use arthroscopy pure or augmented. What is pure? Pure, you can make the tunnel and you can pass all the sutures that you want into the tunnel. You can make 1, 2, or more tunnel. So you can manage all type of the tear. You can make the number of tunnel depending on the type and on the extension of the tear. But in this case, you have to pay attention to the bone quality, because if you want to repair a rotator cuff tendon tear, but the bone quality is bad, this technique you can have some problems. We know that a low bone quality is often associated with osteopenia of the humeral head. In fact, the tendon tears are associated with a reduction in cancellous bone density of greater than 15%. And the assessment of bone quality is important for the placement of suture anchors, because if you want to repair such type of lesion with an osteoporotic bone, you have to place the sutures too much medial, so to overcome this problem. Moreover, the quality of the bone may also be affected by the presence of a greater tuberosity cysts, and the prevalence of cystic changes was reported of about 10%. So when you have to repair a rotator cuff with an osteoporotic bone or a greater tuberosity cyst, pay attention. Do not use, in my mind and my hand, do not use this equipment, because you can observe the cheese grating effect, and so your sutures may fail. For this reason, in this case, I recommend to augment the lateral cortical humerus. And the augmentation with the Transosseous, you can manage all type of tear. It's not in function of the bone quality, and the number of tunnel that you can make are 1 or 2, and two parallel tunnel, or 1 tunnel with 2 medial exit. What is the augmentation? The augmentation we call this kind of augmentation is called the elite, and it's a device made of PEEK, and it represents a perfect platform for sutures. In fact, it consists of 2 slots at the rear and at the front with 8 stabilizing flaps, and you can put 3 or more sutures, high strength sutures. You can load in the front slot, while in the rear slot it's possible to put a Vicryl 0 suture that you can use as a shuttle. The augmentation in arthroscopic rotator cuff repair with Transosseous was a great solution for me, and in particular to treat the greater tuberosity cyst. And just this month, we have published a paper on 25 patients operated on arthroscopic transosseous repair with the augmentation of the lateral cortical humerus, and associated with greater tuberosity cyst, with really very good results. And this is the first paper published not only on a case report on the treating the rotator cuff with the cyst, but it's the first paper with a case series. Another problem to manage for the surgeon, for a shoulder surgeon, is the re-tear, or better, a non-healing of the rotator cuff. You know that, as we said before, that biological healing of repaired rotator cuff tendon takes from 8 to 11 weeks. And with Alex, we studied a lot about the terminology of re-tear or non-healing. The re-tear or recurrent tear is represented by rotator cuff failure that occurs after 6 months postoperatively. It means a lesion that repaired and then may occur a tear again, while there is also another aspect of a re-tear, that is the non-healing, that is a rotator cuff failure that happens within 6 months after surgery. A lot of factors may affect the healing rates of the rotator cuff. The re-tear rates is in the range of 11–57%, and it depends on the lesion, on the quality of the tissue, and obviously is correlated by biological and mechanical factors. A re-tear may be asymptomatic or minimal symptomatic, and in this case, a non-operative approach may be recommended, while the symptomatic case may be recommended a revision surgery. Obviously, in the revision surgery, we can face with a hostile articular environment, because we can have a decreased muscular atrophy, a bone cyst in the greater tuberosity that in this case may be cyst, iatrogenic cyst, due to the presence of the anchors employed in the first surgery, an increased fat infiltration, and a foreign body reaction to the implanted device or sutures. Also in this case, the all arthroscopic transosseous approach with the augmentation produced really very good results, and we have published our case series just 2 years ago. And now I want to show you another indication that in my hand and in my mind, I think it's ideal. I had a small cases about it. That is the treatment of the greater tuberosity fracture, in particular the greater tuberosity fracture avulsion, in which the fragment, the bony fragment, is too small to support a screw, is too small to support a plate with screw. And in these cases, a double row suture bridge repair was proposed. There are some case reports about it, but I thought to use the Transosseous approach with the augmentation to treat the fracture avulsion of the greater tuberosity. And I show you some steps about the tunnel preparation. Obviously, you go almost 1.5–2 centimeters below the fracture. The yellow arrows is indicating the margin of the fracture of the humeral cortex, we are in a lateral decubitus, and you have to prepare the humeral cortex laterally. Then you can insert the tailor stitch, that is the device that you can use to perform the tunnel, and then you can enter with the augmentation, with the lead, the augmentation made of PEEK. And this is the arthroscopic view from the lateral portal, in which you can see the big fragment of the greater tuberosity. All the sutures comes out from the fracture, from the bed of the fracture. You can see the cartilage of the humeral head. And in this case, I prefer, well, I love to use tape, and I don't use any more cord-like conventional sutures. And you can see how with the tape you can arm and prepare all the bony fragment, and then you can close in a double row manner, in a mattress type, the sutures, and then in a double row manner you can close your sutures on the rear slot of the elite. The arthroscopy approach makes a lot of advantages, because you can have the Transosseous technique advantages, such as mechanical problems, no risk of anchor pull-out, no risk of suture damage. About the cost, Alex will show us some details. And also we can manage arthroscopically a trauma with a lower scar tissue adhesion, lower peri and postoperative morbidity. We can visualize in a good manner and treat any associated lesion. For example, in this case, as you can see, the number 3 in the figure is an anterior lesion that was of the supraspinatus, not involved in the fragment. And so you can manage optimally and mobilize the fragment. And this is a figure about the technique in which you can pass the tape not into the bone, because the fragment is really small, and the risk is to fracture it and to split the fracture. But you can pass the sutures through the tendon, so you can manage a fracture avulsion of the greater tuberosity like a rotator cuff tear. So in my mind and my hand, the right indication of the arthroscopic transosseous repair are obviously all type of rotator cuff tear, the rotator cuff re-tear, and I add now also the greater tuberosity fracture avulsion. But I think that we are not stopped now, and so I put some points and we can talk about it. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Claudio, for your presentation. Now you should step out. Step out of sharing the screen, otherwise I cannot get in. Thank you. You're still in, so I cannot share my screen.
I stopped sharing my screen, Alex.
Okay, I get a message. You cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing. Let's do that now. Yes. Okay. Now, this is my screen. And thank you again. Can you see it?
Yes, Alex.
Everybody can. Very good. Now, my closing topic for tonight, this is just an introductory meeting before the discussion that we will have in 1 week, so everybody can think about it, is what is the rationale? Why I should do my surgery with this technique, number 1. Number 2, more and more, the cost effectiveness of what we do is becoming important. So we really need to go into it. This is my disclosure. And of course, I have also an NCS company. And let's go to this rationale and cost effectiveness. Briefly, because Steve will make a wonderful presentation on July the 3rd about the history, but rotator cuff repair is one of the many nightmares that the shoulder surgeon has in his professional life. And you see that there are many, many techniques described, starting with Codman, my hero, going to many other excellent surgeons describing this rotator cuff repair with different techniques. Then arthroscopy came. Here I'm showing you some classic pictures, and Steve was trying to teach me about it. You see that we have old tools like the Kaspari punch and so on and so on. We started making the closure of the defect with this arthroscopy. And then arthroscopy evolved in terms of anchors, in terms of suture and configuration of the repair, ending up with the Transosseous effect, with the double row and the suture bridge that became very popular at a certain stage. But let's go to the science. Facts are facts. What is the gold standard to compare all the repair technique in the peer review literature? The gold standard is, sorry, not advancing, open rotator cuff repair, Transosseous. And you see here a lot of literature sustaining this. The gold standard, the reference for our repair, is Transosseous repair. And this is a picture that I used in my first paper, it was 2012, with the pendulum that is moving from open transosseous here, then mini open transosseous, then mini open with anchors, exactly the step that where I was taught by Steve in 1990, then arthroscopic with anchors, single row, double row, transosseous equivalent. Maybe that this pendulum is really moving back into an old transosseous, but at this time arthroscopic. And I'm not the only one thinking this, because even Pietro Randelli made a big review of the history of the rotator cuff repair. Open, you see here, from Codman and on, then mini open, then arthroscopic rotator cuff, and now transosseous to our days. And in fact, it was not invented yesterday. You see that there are many attempts to reproduce by the scope an arthroscopic transosseous repair. You see Fliga, giant needle, Krishnan with the arthrotunneler, with which I started doing my early experiences, then using ACL guide, and Beauchamp from Canada with the Kurt Passer, Herbert Resch with the big suture again, then the Taylor came, and some other using a drill guide. You see that the evolution also of the system that I'm using, from this aiming needle, just targeting the exit, and then moving into the last release that is very, very much user-friendly, so evolving. Now, let's go again to the science. Are we happy with this, yes or no? Claudio already showed this in some papers he did, good results. And again, this is our first paper with Sumant. At that time, it was the arthrotunneler with this X-box configuration, where we had 87% healing at MRI in 32 cases, 28 had a good healing. Then we went into a midterm clinical outcomes following arthroscopic transosseous, and these are the results. And now the numbers are increasing. We have more than 100 cases, 1 year follow-up that is quite short, but you will see later. Then we went to another evaluation with good satisfactory subjective clinical outcome and no complication. Important, no complication, as already mentioned by Claudio. It is something that we like to have in our surgery. This paper was already shown briefly by Matteo. We also studied this biomechanical evaluation for revision. I like very much using the transosseous when I have a greater tuberosity that is packed and crowded by anchors and other tools that are there, and you cannot remove them easily, and so on and so on. This is a study done with the group of Gas Mazzocca in their lab, and we demonstrated that it is something feasible you can rely on. But this is the study I like the most. It is a level 2 evidence. Just a couple of years ago, we compared in a retrospective study the fixation by MRI, that's important, with a minimum follow-up of 2 years, a little longer than, comparing a single row and transosseous. And look at the numbers here. We evaluated the outcome with the Sugaya classification, that is something accepted in our community. And you see that transosseous has 50 cases, and suture anchors vented the single row 42. So the group is quite homogeneous. And then going again to the Sugaya classification, retear for grade 4 or 5, 18% in the transosseous, 19 for the suture anchor. Very, I should say the same thing. Grade 1, 19, 38%, 23% for the vented anchors. Grade 2, 20 cases, 13 cases, so very similar. And overall, these are the results of the success. 82 for transosseous and 80 for the old suture anchors single row. But look at this, grade 3, it is where I noticed that we have a relevant difference. So I focus on that. And what is grade 3? It is simply something that it is probably scar tissue, according to the description of Hiro Sugaya. And so it is annealing with a rupture in continuity. also described by Joe Iannotti. So 26% of healing in anchor group is type 3. Is this a healing or rupturing continuity? For sure, it is a poor healing. So something that I obtained from this study is that probably the biological response that I have with my repair with the Transosseous is better for some reason, including I was discussing with Brad about this. Strength is important, but also we have other factors that are influencing the healing that we heard before. So this is something that really was hitting my mind. Then it is also a creative technique because fantasy is our limit, already mentioned by Claudio. This is a study that he did demonstrating the figure of 8, but you can really play with this tool in many, many, many different ways. So now let's go to another data. Let's say that clinically I can get good results, at least the same of using the anchors. And let's see what happens if I really want to go into the epidemiology. This is something that I like to mention. Tim Bunker is a British researcher, and his aphorisms say, gray hair are equal to rotator cuff hair, white hair are equals to big cuff hair. Claudio and myself, we don't have this problem. We will never get white hair, but maybe we can get a full hair. Now, this is what happens in our patient. If we have a ranking about pain, the first one in the ranking is back pain, the second one is knee, the third one is shoulder. And rotator cuff tear is the most relevant cause of shoulder pain with a prevalence that is between 5 to 40%. So it is something relevant. And rotator cuff repair is the most common shoulder procedure. The burden of rotator cuff surgery in Italy, a nationwide registry study by Giuseppe Umelalonga, very nice researcher, a full professor in the university in Rome. And he reported this, how much it is increasing the surgery for rotator cuff in our country. You see here through the years. And if we proceed in this direction with the present cost of the procedure, only in Italy, we will spend 1 billion euros by 2025. That is quite impressive. Let's go now to the US. Of course, a big country, over 300 million people living there. And you see that the repair of the cuff is very much common, both open and arthroscopic, and it is increasing. You see, white is 1996, black is 2006. It is not triple, but more than double increase in the number. So it is increasing very much. What is also important is that most of the people that we operate on for the rotator cuff, they are working population. So they are people that are not just playing chess or cards, or maybe some golf, not that good, but they are working. So they need a good, healthy shoulder for their job. And it is something important that is influencing also the importance of our surgery. So this is what happens as a DRG in Italy, a little bit more than 2,000 euros. That again is leading to the numbers that I told you before. But imagine, Italy is a small country, 60 million people. Imagine how much important is the cost in the United States, where the numbers are much, much higher. Billions and billions of euros to treat this tendon tear. And again, these are the systems that we have available. There are many out in the market there, and these are the costs. All these anchors that we use are expensive. And then we started with a single row. For some reason, we wanted to mimic the Transosseous. Now we have the double row. Some authors speak about the triple row. And this is not only increasing the amount of rows, but it is increasing significantly the cost of the equipment that you use. And again, this is something very relevant. And it is true also in other countries. You see that the cost in Germany is around 300 euros. the average cost depends on the hospital capability, but also in Iran. In Iran, where 300 euros for one anchor is something very, very relevant. In Israel, the pricing is always around this amount of money. So it is expensive. And let's see what happens then. This is not my paper, but it is very interesting, just 5 years ago. And you see that how much is the cost of Transosseous or Transosseous equivalent. And here in the third column here, you have the difference for the small tear, medium tear, large tear, massive, and overall all the implants, all the surgeries, sorry. So you see how much you can save for a small tear comparing a Transosseous equivalent and the real Transosseous, $500. The total cost is around 1,000, and the case length is very similar, 8 minutes. And looking at this column here, when you reach the final part, you understand that overall you can save something like a shorter surgical room use, and about $2,000 can be saved. Okay, now let's go to another thing. I can save the money with this Transosseous, but I am giving my patient a good clinical outcome too, because of course it is important. We don't want only to save money. We want to have an happy patient, and maybe a patient that goes back to his job. That is important for his family and for the entire socioeconomics of our society. Again, here it is the cost, Transosseous equivalent, blue and red, small all over the tears, and small, medium, large, and massive. But look here in the right histograms, where you have the simple shoulder test scores at the baseline at 3, 6, and 12 months after surgery for Transosseous and Transosseous equivalent. And this is Transosseous, this is Transosseous equivalent. They are similar results in terms of clinical results, but still every single bar is better, although slightly, it is better in the Transosseous. So I saved money and I gave at least the same result, maybe a little better. So this is another paper demonstrating that the cost is increasing when you use anchors, and the clinical outcome is not affected using a Transosseous system. So when we approach our surgery, especially for rotator cuff, we have a lot of options. And every single time that you have a lot of options is only for one reason, because no option is perfect. Otherwise, we would use always a single option to manage the problem. But it is not only a matter now, not anymore, because the society and the economics are changing. Even the recent COVID crisis is emphasizing this aspect, because we need to keep in our consideration, and anyone in the audience now can think about his own environment in terms of economics, society, organization, hospital, and so on. But anyways, the government are ruling on us. Timing is important, money, the expectation of the patient, the hospital administration, all these things should be kept into consideration. So the cost associated with the evaluation of rotator cuff tear is relevant, and it is even starting before it. You see, this is important. We spend almost $2,000 before going to surgery, and then we keep on spending a lot of money, as you have seen, during our procedures. And we must keep this very much into our focus for the future, because the cost effectiveness of medical care is becoming more and more relevant. It is a complicated issue. I'm very much intrigued now by this. I'm not making you crazy at this time of the day, but there is a real important science behind it that we need to start thinking of, giving to our patient the best treatment possible, but also keeping an eye over the expenses of our procedure. They must have sense, and they must be cost effective. At the end, I strongly believe that rotator cuff repair by Transosseous is at least equivalent to the current methods, in terms of repair integrity, biomechanical strength. We discussed this during this evening, the evening for us at least. It is a reliable, reproducible technique. The learning curve is not longer than any other learning curve. Of course, there are some issues like the bone tunnel augmentation, assessing the lesion and so on, but it is even a great help to make a reoperation in case of retear, that we know it is not that rare event in our daily experience. So it is for sure a tool that is adding something to our professional condition. And of course, it is not very much pushed by the company because it is not increasing the budget, but we are doctors and we must be thinking also about this. And this is just a little closure. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, because of the COVID, our second European Congress is postponed by 1 year. We will have only a video conference for the papers presentation. And also my course in Milan is postponed 1 year, the SMILE, Show the Milan International Live Experience. But it is not postponed, hopefully. It is the World Congress in Rome that I'm organizing with Professor Gumina in Rome in 2022, and we will have many other options for great opportunity and sharing ideas. And thank you for staying with us tonight. And I hope it was interesting, but it is only the first step of an entire program that will proceed in the next days. As you know, on this 3rd of July with Steve Snyder and a big roundtable for discussion. And then for a very special event for our Latin American friends. And this is why Dr. Macedo, Luis, another friend that is introducing this special event for July the 11th, the Latin American event. Thank you very much. Okay, Luis.
Hello, Dr. Professor Castagna. Thank you for the invitation. Let me take my presentation. Okay. See you well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. It's a great honor for us to host the 4th Transosseous Academy meeting for the first time in Latin America. This meeting is postponed by the pandemic. It's scheduled for July 23-24, the next year in Lima, Peru. We will have excellent speakers, such Drs. Stephen Snyder, Alessandro Castagna, Javier Duralde, Claudio Chillemi, and Miriam Capasso. It will take place in Miraflores, and a quiet and safe district from the ocean, with world-class restaurants and bars. We will have a large and comfortable auditorium near the main hotel, and modern operating rooms in the prestigious Delgado Clinic, located in the same district. We will be very proud to show you something of our beautiful city, legendary land of the Incas. And now, let me show you a short promotion video. Okay.
A world where the sun walked the earth. Gods were hidden within stones. cultures dominated the oceans. A world where death created life. With the universe. In this world where the sun's sweat and the moon's tears protected the chosen ones. A magical legend emerged to forge the Inca Empire. To be one of the greatest civilizations of all time. An empire where the immensity of magical lakes blended with cities that were born from the earth. Bravest of warriors traveled from unknown oceans to fortresses hidden in the mist. Peru, empire of hidden treasures. 5,000 years of history, still alive. Don't watch the movie. Live it for real. Visit Peru.
Okay. See you soon in Lima. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Luis. And it was very special and very attractive for this. And we, of course, we postponed 1 year. This infection was terrible. I read on the news that also your country is affected very much, like it was our country. And I wish you that everything will go better in the short, near future. Now, thank you all the speakers. I hope it was a very good introduction. Brett Sanders put me a few questions but I answered him. We will discuss this directly on the 3rd of July, when we will have a roundtable and we have a lot of time allotted for discussion. This was an introduction today, just to understand the biomechanics, the indication, the biology, and the rationale and the economics that are behind this idea of going arthroscopic transosseous rotator cuff repair. And on the 3rd of July, we will go deeper into it after a big introduction by Steve Snyder. And I'm very proud and grateful to him for participating into this project. And I hope everyone to have a good day for those where the day is still on, or a good night for the people ready to go to sleep. And thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.